Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, where we simplify the complexities of your leadership journey. I'm your host, Mo, and today I have a very extraordinary guest who challenges us to live not just longer, but deeper, richer, and with intention. Rabbi Daniel Cohen is a speaker, author, personal development mentor whose work is guiding CEOs, athletes, politicians, and everyday people like you and me to lead their lives with purpose and legacy. He's the senior rabbi at the congregation Agudath Shalom. Did I get that right, Rabbi?
You did a great job.
Thank you. And that's the largest modern Orthodox synagogue in New England. He's the co-host of a nationally syndicated show, The Rabbi and the Reverend. He's founder of the Legacy Academy, and he's author of What Will They Say About You When You're Gone? He's also the author of The Secret of Light. Today, we're going to unpack all of this together. Rabbi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with you.
Yeah. Before I get to my questions, Rabbi, why don't you tell my audience a little bit about you, who you are, where you came from, and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. First and foremost, a child of God, as we all are. Created in God's image and just trying to spread the light. I was born and bred in Atlanta with a strong sense. My mother passed away many years ago, but a strong sense of being grateful every day, a sense that life had meaning and purpose. And I'm one of 6 children. I'm the oldest of 6. And thank God, I would say more of a calling as opposed to I see it as a profession. I decided to devote my life to not only serving in the rabbinate, but really helping people realize the best version of themselves through faith and life experience. My mom passed away at a very young age when she was 44 from a brain aneurysm. And that turned my life, as you can imagine, upside down, realizing that life can change in an instant. But for me, a pivotal moment was when I got to the same age as my mom. I began to ask more deeply, am I leading the life that really I'm destined to lead? I'm making the most of every day. And that really led to the writing of the book. And I have a wonderful soul partner, my wife, thank God, of over 35 years. We have, thank God, 6 daughters, 5 son-in-laws, and thank God we just had our 13th grandchild. So we're very blessed. And I serve as the rabbi. Yeah, keeps me really busy. So I serve as a rabbi, but also I do a lot of work in the area of helping people tap into the highest frequency of living and just trying to maximize every day and realize that God isn't asking us to change the world, but he is saying, what are you going to do today to change the world of one person? And that's the way the world begins to change.
Wow. Thanks for that, Rabbi. I'd love to talk about legacy and what that really means. You talked a little bit about your life and how you started asking questions. What does the word legacy mean to you? And how has your definition evolved over time?
So to me, the word legacy is in many ways ensuring that anybody that enters into my orbit leaves feeling better about themselves when they exit my orbit. Sometimes we confuse the notion of legacy with the name on a building or giving a lot of money or some monumental act. But I think one of the things that I've realized over time is that each one of us is designed to offer something unique in the world, to be God's partner, different than any other human being in the universe. And my spiritual footprint is different. And I don't believe that any day should go by without doing something that is worthy of future memory. Create legacy by asking myself, what am I doing today to realize the divine potential within me and to share that light with the world? One of the sources that I think about a lot is it's a famous idea of a Jewish mystic, but it applies to humanity. He says, the day you're born is the day when God believes the world needs you. And Judaism teaches us that every day we have to see ourselves as if we're reborn. Let go of yesterday. Don't focus on tomorrow. And legacy is created literally. It could be in just moments when I lift somebody up, when I help them, when I listen intently without thinking of anything else in the world. That's the way that I change the world around me. That's ultimately what legacy is about.
Rabbi, when you ask the question, what will they say about you when you're gone? What's the leadership lesson under that question that each of us needs to be asking ourselves?
I would say, look, leadership in many ways is about influence. I think that's important. I'm a big fan, by the way, of John Maxwell. Read a lot of his books, and he talks about that a lot, that, to be a leader doesn't necessarily need to mean you're CEO. Leadership is about how am I influencing a child, a grandchild? How am I going out of my way to mentor somebody? How am I being a role model for others? So I think when you think about it from a leadership perspective, it's a recognition that I oftentimes lead and influence not by what I say, but what I do. And my actions will reverberate. So the whole question of what will they say about me when I'm gone keeps me laser focused on what really matters, on what is truly most important. I'll give you an example. One of the areas I talk about a lot in the book is the notion of courageous choices. We oftentimes are challenged with decisions that may be expedient, but the question in life is, do we operate based on convenience or conviction, principle or
Mm.
pressure? I mean, a very important leadership question is that I have to recognize, as King Solomon says, a good name is worth more than all the money in the world. Warren Buffett, another great sage. It's interesting when I put Solomon and Warren Buffett in the same zone,
I
but he
thought about
says,
that. It's cool.
I thought about that. I like doing that. But he should live and be well. It takes 20 years to build a reputation. It takes 5 minutes to destroy a reputation. And understanding as a leader that, I want to be able to look at my face and say, I didn't play life safe. I did what was right. So sometimes asking these questions helps us really get outside of ourselves of being self-absorbed and thinking about self-transcendence and how the decisions that I make as a leader really will reverberate eternally, affecting me, reflecting on my family, and also will reverberate into the future.
Rabbi, you've spoken about the loss of your mother, and you just mentioned that early in the podcast right here as a turning point in your life. Can you share a little bit more about how that experience shaped your perspective on purpose and urgency?
Yes. I think both of the points very much so. I mean, look, I grew up in a beautiful home. My father, he should live and be well, also was very much focused on really solid values. I remember as a teenager, and it wasn't like I was a hard partier by any means, but when I would go out with my friends, my father would always look at me and say, "Remember who you are." That's all he needed to say.
Man, whew.
I mean, you don't need to say much more than that. And like, oh boy. And my mother, like, when people would ask her how she was doing, she would always say, thank God, fantastic. Living in a home that was, I would say, focused on purpose and gratitude and try to make the most of every day. However, sometimes we live with that intellectually, but we don't always lead our life guided by that principle. And when my mom passed away, I was young. I was in early 20s. And again, I wasn't that, didn't have that much life experience, but obviously that sort of thing, God forbid if it happens, it really just takes you for a loop. And you say, I wish I could hug my mom a little bit more. I wish she was here to listen to me. And it really made me value just the simple things in life. I think sometimes, we don't recognize one of the great rabbis of the 20th century said, live life with radical amazement. Everything is
Mm,
wondrous. Everything is beautiful. I go back to a
yeah.
story at the height of COVID, a 94-year-old man who was on a ventilator for many months. And thank God he survived, but on his way out of the hospital, he was given the bill for a ventilator for one day. And he started to cry. And they said to him, are you crying because you can't pay the bill? He said, I have all the money to pay the bill, but I've been breathing God's air for 94 years for free. And
Huh.
now I know how much one day's breath is worth.
Wow, man. I just have to
So,
sit with that for a second. Wow.
yeah, you have to just sit there and say, my gosh, like, thank God that when I wake up in the morning, God says, I believe in you. Today's a sacred day. Every day is like an unpolished diamond. And at the end of the day, we give that diamond back. And God says, how much light did you bring out of that diamond? So I would say, when it comes to leading a life with greater intention, obviously my mother's tragic loss awakened me. But I would say what I've learned over the years is that although in those moments of grief, I was angry, I was asking why, I realized that the greatest way that I could pay tribute to my mother is not by lamenting the darkness, but by increasing her light. So I've doubled down on saying, what are the values that my mom stood for? And it's become so much a part of who I am. I feel my mom's presence. And I try to encourage other people um, not to ask why, because we'll never get the answers, but to say, now that I've had this loss, how can I turn it into legacy? How can I turn it into meaning? How can I fill the void that my mother cannot fill on her own to ensure that her legacy and my life is elevated through her as well?
In your book, What Will They Say About You When You're Gone? You talk about reverse engineering your life. How would you explain that to someone who's never heard the concept before?
I would say, listen to your podcast. No, what I was,
There you go.
so, the interesting thing is that when I began to write this book, I wasn't thinking in that vein, and I'll explain what I mean. I went through about 100 eulogies that I wrote to try to extract what is the essence of a good life. And then I was sitting with a businessman who said, what you're really trying to do is help people reverse engineer their life, which is the following. Let's say I see a product that I emulate or that I want. let's say, what you do is you want to, and you don't know how to make it. So you take it apart and then you say, what are the steps to help me make that product myself? So what I try to do is that, identify what is that version of yourself. I help people develop their prototype. Let's say here's a quick thing. I say to them, what are the 5 questions what are the five, words you want to be remembered by? Now, somebody said to me, that was a really important exercise. And I'll tell you why. He said, I want to be remembered as a father, as a son, as a friend. And he has 2 more. And then he said, you know what? I forgot to write down that I want to be remembered as a brother and I have a sister. So automatically that exercise awakened within him. Now, what are the steps that I can take to reverse engineer my life so that now I can say that and that relationship is strong? So what I help people do is I really try to distill what are, in this case, maybe the 7 principles of what is a life of legacy, of importance. And then I develop these steps to help people say, okay, here are the pathways to help you lead your life where those ideas, which is who you want to be remembered by, you can intentionally align your life with that every single day. And everybody here has, I think it's interesting. I'd like to distinguish between purpose and mission. Every human being has the same purpose. We all have different missions. What's the purpose of every human being? It's to reflect the light that God has put within us. God didn't create any human being by accident. He breathes into us because he believes that we are needed to help improve the world. But my spiritual template, my talents, my strengths, my weaknesses, my community, all that's different. But God says, but you have a different mission. I'm not here to replicate anybody else, but God is saying, don't live life from crisis to crisis. That's the way most people, get motivated. Somebody gets sick. They're at a funeral. They say, oh my gosh, I've been focusing on the wrong things. But imagine though, if we really keep the urgency of every day front and center with the realization that I'm here for a purpose, to emanate my light, to seize opportunities, to do acts of kindness without expectation of anything in return, to be more grateful, mindful, slow to anger, and then I'll manifest that in my world, then my life becomes exponentially more meaningful, deeper, relationships stronger, and my life just has much more meaning.
Rabbi, which of the 7 principles that you talk about do you find that people struggle with the most, and is there a reason why?
I mean, in the world today, the hardest one is what I call, it's really like living inspired, which is really tied to the notion of mindfulness, or actually it's really called seizing meditative moments, to be more specifically. Living inspired is more about gratitude, but seizing meditative moments, because we're living in a world that is so invasive, to really create the sacred space, to be fully present in the moment that I'm experiencing right now without any other distraction is one of the hardest things for people to do. That's the gift, by the way, of a Sabbath, like for 25 hours on Friday night till Saturday, you don't be Jewish to observe the Sabbath. I put my phone away and no internet. The world will wait. Sometimes we confuse. We're called human beings. We're not called human doings. You know what I'm saying? So like we're doing 6 days a week, but you got to be present with the people around you. And look, I think that I find that's hard, but I also find that people can take control of their lives. I mean, you don't need a lot it just takes some discipline. But if you can be fully mindful and present, you'll find that people's hearts open up to you. I was with actually my nieces and nephews recently in Florida. These are all teenagers. And I said to them, I want to give you a piece of advice. And they were looking for advice, by the way. It wasn't like I was just like throwing it at them. But I was talking about a story in the Bible. Are you a Bible fan? Can I give you a quick Bible story here?
Absolutely. Give it to me.
I'll give it to you. Feel it up. Get ready for it. So one of the most pivotal stories in the redemption is in the book of Exodus, where it says Moses passes by a burning bush and he sees the bush that is on fire. And there's a miracle. The bush is not being consumed. And he asks God, he wonders, why is this happening? And when God sees that Moses wonders, God then opens up and becomes part of his life. So some of the commentators explain that a lot of people saw the burning bush. But what's the difference between Moses and everybody else? Well, if you're not paying attention and you walk right by the bush, all you see is a bush on fire. But if you pause for 30 seconds, you'll realize there's a miracle taking place right in front of your eyes. So sometimes, if you're fully present, when I said to my nieces and nephews, I said, how often does somebody fully listen to you without any other distraction? It's one of the rarest things in the world today. I said, if you guys can become that person, that people know that they have your full undivided attention when they're talking to you, your relationships will be deeper, God will enter more into your life, and your life will be totally uplifted. It's hard, but I think we can do it. But
Yeah.
to me, that's the one. Someone said jokingly, they said, today we have CPA, which is continuous partial attention.
I feel like I suffer from that, Rabbi.
It's hard but those
Yeah.
moments are the moments when you can recalibrate your life because you're saying, let me stop. Let me see, how am I doing? How can I be better? And what I'm doing today in line with who I want to be, or just passing the time?
Let's talk a little bit more about relationships, kindness, impact, spiritual practice. You emphasize that legacy isn't just about the big achievements. So, how do small acts of kindness build long lasting influence?
So I'll give you a couple of great examples. I think they're very much in the leadership realm, which is, God is not going to ask us only simply, what did you do right and what did you wrong? Most people, I'm sure, listening to this podcast, they're good people, right? I think you probably do it like an exam. You take a test before they come in. Just kidding.
Oh, they all pass flying colors.
Yeah. But spiritual greatness is not only about doing what's right and what's wrong, it's anticipating opportunities for impact. It's saying, where is there an opportunity for me to make a difference in somebody's life? So here's a great example. I mean, somebody's maybe a mentor. And rather than wait for somebody to come to you to ask for advice, think about people in your family, think about people in your community, think about people in your office who may be struggling. And then go over to them and say, is there anything that I could do to maybe help you? Maybe I can sit down with you and be a sounding board for you. And that could be, by the way, for you, maybe it's 20 minutes of your time. For that person, it may be a new opportunity within the company. It may be a new job. It may be that you think of somebody, maybe they're single and they're looking for their soulmate, and somebody maybe that they could meet, and now they feel a little more settled in their life. I mean, I think about that a lot. My sister was the one who introduced me to my wife. How did they know each other? They ate breakfast together at college. That's it. And till this day, it's 35 years later, 6 children later, 5 son-in-laws, 13 grandchildren. And it's because of one stirring in my sister's soul that she decided to say, you know what, maybe this woman is good for my brother, that made all the difference in the world and reverberates for generations. That's what I mean. So acts of kindness are not waiting, but it's looking at the orbit. It's anticipating the pass, as we would say in basketball lingo, because that's really where good becomes great and where our lives truly can soar.
Rabbi, for somebody who's listening who struggles with slowing down and being fully present and experiencing the things you're talking about, what advice would you give them? Someone who feels like their time is always slipping by.
Okay. Yeah. So I would say, I like to call it sacred scheduling. Can you hear me? You're good?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's never a matter when it comes to doing anything that's important of time. It's always a matter of priorities. You have 168 hours a week. And I do this with people. I say, can you spare 5 minutes out of those 168 to work on your soul? Nobody has told me no. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I suggest what I call the 3-minute program. And the only way it's going to happen is 3 minutes a day. So if you put it in your calendar right now, if you don't put it in, it's not going to happen. But it'll happen if you put it in there. Nobody expects you to answer the phone when you're swimming. I mean, people do respect that you take time for yourself, right? Oh my
Yeah.
God, I got to answer my email. I'm underneath the water right now. But okay. You know what I'm saying? That's it. Make yourself a priority and everything else will go. 3 minutes a day. Your first minute is a minute of prayer. I pray the words of Isaiah. Those who have faith in God, their strength will be renewed. They will grow wings like eagles and run and not walk. Your second minute is start a gratitude journal today. And I learned this from my daughter. She writes a gratitude journal, but here's the key. Don't repeat yourself. And when I found out about this, she was up to about almost 800 of them. And she said to me, every night before I go to sleep, I read 50 of them. How can I not be grateful? So 1 minute a day, write something you're grateful for, and then don't repeat yourself because it forces you to look for new things.
Sure.
And then the third minute is make somebody's day. And what I recommend is this. On a Sunday, just write a list of people. Maybe it was a teacher that you forgot about, but you did something for you. Maybe it's a friend who's sick. Maybe it's an easy, write a whole list. And then one person, one day in that minute, send them a text, make a phone call. And you will find that even if the whole day is crazy, those 3 minutes of spiritual intention begin to fill your soul with the fortification and the orientation and the passion to try to add those ideas to your day, and things could work from there. So 3 minutes a day is what I would say start with, but put it into your calendar or it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I like that. And we can all find 3 minutes. So
We can.
Yeah.
Nobody's that busy.
Nobody's that busy. Rabbi, you've said don't confuse your role with your soul. What does that look like in the life of leaders who might identify pretty strongly with who they are in their professional roles?
Okay. Look, I think that's sometimes, of course, the challenge because, it's very tempting to get our sense of self-worth from what other people, how they see us. So I'm in my office, I'm this, I don't mean me or whatever in your office and, your employees are talking to you, you're this, you're that, and you have that role. But it's important to understand that at the end of the day, the roles change. When I walk in, I had an interview recently. I'm writing another book now with Alan Houston, the Knicks player, former Knicks player, who's a friend. And David Robinson was one of the guys that I interviewed, the Admiral from the Spurs. And he said, look, to be a successful basketball player, you got to believe that you're the best when you're on the court. He said, but when I come home, I got to remember that I'm a husband. I have to remember that I'm a father. I have to leave the ego on the court and ask myself, what now can I serve? Who can I serve? And to me, that's one of the most important messages for life. Senator Lieberman, who wrote the foreword to the book of blessed memory that I wrote, believed that strongly. You know, he would sit with presidents and senators and world leaders, but I would see him in synagogue and he would just, as we say in Yiddish, he would schmooze with the people. He would just have he would have a little scotch and a little
Yeah.
cake. And he didn't care. He didn't say, "Oh, yesterday I talked to the president," but here's another human being in front of you. That's where your head's got to be. And I think it requires a little more humility, but also recognition that our roles will change. Sometimes, by the way, if people don't understand this, they keep on going back to try to fill that role, but they don't realize they're missing really a new opportunity in their life because they define themselves. Like I always will say to people, when I say to them, like, what do you do? I said, I don't want to hear that you're a doctor. I want to say, who are you? That's your
Yeah.
role. I'm a rabbi, but that's not who I am. That's what I do. So I think
Wow.
it's a challenge, but I think, that's where nourishment comes in through faith and through friends. I think it's very important, by the way, to help people. If your friends are people that honor you only for what you have or what you do, but not for who you are, that ultimately becomes very corrosive. But as somebody said, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. If you surround yourself with people that really understand who you are and like you for who you are, not for how much money you have or what you do, but they just appreciate that you're a good person, a kind person, an authentic person, then you'll be nourished to help fuel that part of your life.
Rabbi, your work resonates across religions and philosophies. What universal truth about purpose and legacy do you think that everybody can embrace regardless of their belief system?
I think that what everybody ultimately recognizes is that there is a yearning in all of us for meaning, to make a difference. Nobody wants to. I've sat with hundreds of people at the end of their life of different faiths. At the end of the day, everybody wants to know that they made a difference, that they made the world a little bit better. And I think what I try to help people do, and again, this is what I've learned from my own writings, my own teachers, is to help people fill their souls, not with counterfeit pleasures, but with what really matters. Because no matter how big you may be in terms of stature and influencers and followers and money, at the end of the day, you can have the biggest mansion in the world, but be the loneliest person. But if you have good relationships and family and you've done your best to just bring a little more light into the world, and that I believe is a universal feeling we all have at the end of the day about how to want to be remembered and what really matters. That to me is what I would say the quest here. I'm not trying to impose anything from outside in anybody. I'm just trying, as Michelangelo said when he carved David, he said, I see a big piece of stone and I see David inside. All I'm doing is pulling away all the rocks. So we all have that inner voice. So hopefully we can find different ways, which is what I try to do, to help listen to that voice on a more consistent basis.
Rabbi, where can my audience connect with you? Where can they get more Rabbi Daniel Cohen?
Thank you. So you can definitely reach out to me on my website, which is www.rabbidanielcohen.com. You can also look in the top corner there. There's a link to the Legacy Academy, which is a 10-month virtual program that helps people lead this intentional life through spiritual mentorship, peer consultations, and some inner work so that they can actually incorporate these ideas into their daily life. And, the truth is, when it comes to exercise, you need to work every day. When it comes to your finances, you got to check your portfolio. Same thing with the soul. It takes real disciplined work, but I believe we all have the capacity to lead lives of spiritual greatness.
Rabbi, thank you so much for powerful, practical insights. We're going to drop all of Rabbi's stuff in the in the show notes, so make sure you connect with him if you have questions. Maybe this could be something that could help you. So don't forget to like, subscribe, share this episode with somebody who needs to hear it, somebody who needs purpose, somebody who needs to know their mission. And sign up for our newsletter. It's free. We give you the good stuff. Rabbi, I'd love to have you on again soon, but until then, thanks so much.
Thank you.